I now call upon Shri Gandhi. He is, of course, as we all know, a financial sector specialist, policy expert, and advisor. He's also the member of the Advocacy Council of Sahamati. He is the ex-deputy governor of Reserve Bank of India as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. After listening to very many thinkers and executors' views, I am going to bring you down to earth and brass tacks, because that's what we thought we'll share. Of course, certain comments or the views expressed by, especially by Pramod, is thought-provoking. So by standing on my feet, I can react, but that I will do it separately. So that is a different view. Okay, first today's basic subject relates to account aggregator ecosystems, governance structures, that's what. Of course, between the time the organizers thought about organizing this event, DPTP Act has come in. That has added a little extra flavor to the whole issue, and all the speakers have definitely touched upon that. And the examples that have been quoted both in the Nudge report and the Vidhi report, and right from Nilkanji mentioned about the how we progressed in terms of digital infrastructure, whether it is NPCI model or UIDA model or ONDC model. Everything, all these specific institutions which are governing those respective segments, they are actually doing the basic service thought about under that structure. Like UIDI, it is actually offering the identity service. UPI, the NPCI is offering the UPI related thing, and ONDC is going to do that. Whereas in the account aggregator system, the entity or entities who are actually doing the service have already come into existence. It is not a single entity, multiple number of account aggregators are there. So for this set of specified institutions, what is the governance structure we can think about? That's what I thought I will mention. Because they are already existing. It is not a one single entity which is already doing the service. If we think about that one monopolistic concern manager or account aggregator, then that's a different story. But we have we have not adopted that as a solution. We have agreed that there will be any number of entities will be offering this service. That means that the governance structure that we are talking about is not going to be like NPCI or UIDA or ONDC. It is going to be something different. That's the first point I wanted to make. Then typically in such an entity, what is that this group of account aggregators, or later on as we expand into concern managers, what they would expect from this common entity. That is going to be the key for designing the governance. That's my basic idea that I want to present before you. So if you look at again the history, like everybody else, I also looked at the history, how the system of governing structure have developed in within the financial sector, because that is where I am more familiar with. So and under that, when you look back and see various type of governance structure which have come on, there are varieties of ways in it has come, and varieties of functions the participating entities were expecting or getting it from that governance entity. Like for example, for IBA, that's the Indian Bank Association. It is an association of banks. There it is basically a club for all the mutual entities to meet and discuss about their mutual interest items, subjects, etc. That's an association. Is it clear? Then as we move on, then very many, there are very many such associations. That is not IBA alone. There are others also. Basically a club. Then you have the examples of that these entities would want their voice to be heard by authorities, like regulator or government, or where they want themselves to be represented. So to represent themselves, then there you need one structure through which your voice can be presented to wherever it is needed to be heard. So that is where the like Amphi and others who are in the structure. Again, how it's a company. Later on, they went ahead and thought about creating a legal structure. Yeah, of course, association is also legal structure, but that is a more not a very compact system. So that is where people think about creating a company structure. Under the company also, there are two models, both the Section 25 or Section 8 companies, where not-for-profit organizations, and the regular commercial structure also. We have examples of both in the system, like NPCI is not-for-profit organizations company, and we have company proper commercial company structure, Clearing Corporation of India. That is one example. Then recently FBIL, that our financial benchmark India Limited. That is again a pure company structure. So we have across all these things. Now the purpose for which it is these kind of structures can be built, the thing I thought about is, one, yes, is basically a club where all the interested parties can come and exchange their views. Second, to represent their views in various fora. Or third, it gives a platform for exchanging information amongst common interest, and I think that is there. Plus, then inter se issues can get resolved. So that is another expectation or function these central organization or the governance structure can give. And then when we elevate it further, it is a kind of self-regulatory organization where the adopted codes are being followed or enforced upon the entities like the download entities like FEDI, PDI, FIMDA. They are even Southern and others who have been given that status of SRO. So we have these kind of different functions this central governing institution or entity can do. Now in the account aggregator system, what is that we want from this? So that is where if I buy, and this entity can also offer certain common services which are required by the ecosystem at large, because it is always advantageous to somebody well respected and an authoritative institution. When it offers such service, it becomes easy for others to adopt and accept and read it. So this kind of thing it is there. Now as account aggregator, for prescribing the standards, yes, because it has started from the regulatory initiative, regulator has already tossed upon with Rebit to prepare the minimum initial standards. It has already come into stay. But do we want Rebit itself to become an enlarged entity into this governance sector? That is one model. Then that means, but whereas its task is purely technical, but whereas we want something more beyond technical related issues to be addressed by this governing entity. In that case, it should offer services. That's what I would believe that most important or a requirement that is going to be there is mostly that common services will be as needed by the ecosystem somebody has to offer. Then it has to also should be able to have the ability to resolve inter se problems among various stakeholders, whether it is users or providers or the account aggregators themselves, or even beyond into the hands of citizens and public. So that somebody has to take care of that. So in that case, in my opinion, possibly this is a governance structure which will require to do two primary functions. One is common services, another is inter se related issues to be governed and resolved. So in that case, what should be the structure which will be perfectly will be useful for all the things? It is easy if it is a company structure, because it gives a very defined arrangement for everyone to agree upon, because it is legally enforceable. So company structure is much more robust as compared to association or a society or anything. That is one. Then within the company structure, again, as we know that two type, one is a not for profit and another for profit. Not for profit, it is easy to sell the idea. Any and everyone will immediately will not have much hesitation to join. Whereas in the pure company structure, there could be some hesitation because of commercial interest that could play upon the shareholders' power, and all those things will come into question. So that's why which one to choose and that if he initially Siddharth mentioned about that if he can remove the form versus structure, then it will be easy to handle. That's where we have today the examples of Clearing Corporation of India Limited and ABL, where the even though both are commercially operative companies, the governance structure, there is two. One, of course, legally the board of directors, which are elected by the shareholders typically, but the shareholding entities or the board, the power of the board legally is as prescribed under the Companies Act, but whereas actual operations, the not just there's policies to be determined, the services to be offered, then product and services, then how everything can be presented, everything is decided by the user-led organization. The board typically simply most of the time agrees to whatever has been decided by the user. That setup, you can call it committees, you can call it councils, you can call it a user group or whatever, that is only a naming thing, but it is the users of the respective services who determine the procedures or the governing rules, regulations are approved by them. They discuss and they approve and then present it and then become law. So that's why and because the company structure, what the advantage that we have is that it can operate on a commercial principle because the services offered can be appropriately charged and the revenue can be generated, and that revenue can be utilized for the greater good of the entire community in the form of risk related kitty to be built up or otherwise that. So that way it will be easier if, or it will be more useful if a company structure can be thought about. So that's what the idea that we thought that I will present before you. But the greater idea, whatever you are mentioning about, because right now, as I said, that I am looking at whatever I have discussed relates to the current issue of account aggregator. But when we go beyond pure financial sector aggregation and into much wider, then the requirement is going to be totally different. Whereas, because here we have already started a set of entities as account aggregators, so it may be little easier to create this governing structure. Whereas when we go past beyond the financial system, any and every thing can be brought under the full concern management system, then it may require a totally different kind of structure. We may need it, we have to think about it, that's where lot of debate will have to come up. One last idea that I always believed that whatever we have done, when we go on talking about, we are making the citizen in the center of this whole structure, but I beg to differ. Actually, the DP Act or the whole structure is for data users capability, what we enable them to get and what we restrict them to use. If you put it that way, then it becomes easier, because we are actually not empowering even the concern manager. Yes, it can regulate the flow of data the way it is thought about, but ultimately how it is used by the data user, there we don't have a control. The concern management system does not address that. That we have to find out another method of it. That's where I thought that the DPDP structure by the Act in India or elsewhere is more concentrated, obviously, to ensure that the data collected officially by somebody should be properly utilized, and it should be dealt with ultimately when it is erased, also how it is done, how it is possible to do it. That's a completely totally different structure. That's why DPPP will have to worry more on that. I don't think concern management system will be able to do that. A concern management system only in the initial stages, what flows to the data user, that is controllable through the or regulatable through the concern management system. But afterwards, what happens, and to enforce that, how it is done, that we need to think about totally something differently. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.